Pick and Pop radio show brought to you by The Grueling Truth. Make sure you check out The Grueling Truth Facebook page at facebook.com/The Grueling Truth. I am Rodney Knuppel. I am an on-air broadcaster, I guess you'd call it, on-air personality for ESPN out of Peoria, Illinois. I co-host a weekday show from 3 to 6 Central Time, and also host a Peoria Fantasy Focus show from 9 to 11 a.m. every Sunday morning. We're going to be on this Sunday, and then we're going to move to Saturdays for a couple weeks. And I'm joined by Aaron Ferguson. Aaron Ferguson is a writer for HoopsHabit.com, and he covers the Detroit Pistons, and he covers a little DraftKings NBA. Aaron, you with us today?
Hey, how's it going, Rodney? How are you doing?
Good. We're doing great. This is our first podcast, obviously, of the season. Great day to get started here on New Year's, and we're going to talk NBA today. And I'm looking forward to the second half of the NBA season. And Aaron, you cover the Detroit Pistons a little bit. Brandon Jennings has come back for the Pistons, and give a little spark to the Pistons so far this year.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, he got his first entrance Tuesday night against the New York Knicks, and he came out explosive, had 7 points, 4 assists, and it looked like he really had his feet under him, although it's going to take a few games to get used to playing with the second unit and finding that chemistry together offensively and defensively, but he definitely looks healthy.
Now, what are they going to do with Jennings? I mean, is he going to continue to come off the bench all the way through? I mean, are they weaning him back into possibly a starting role? What's the future hold for Brandon Jennings and the Pistons?
I think Stan Van Gundy's made it very clear that Reggie Jackson's going to be the starting point guard, and that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, of course, he's the best defender of the wing players, who did such an excellent job against Stephen Curry and so many other of the NBA's top talents. So Brandon Jennings will most likely stay on the bench through the whole year, and of course there's been trade rumors. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Right. Sticking with the Pistons, I wanted to talk a little bit about Andre Drummond in the season that he's had in the 6'11", 279-pound center from UConn in his third year. I mean, Andre Drummond's having a fantastic year, 18 points, 16 rebounds. Just tell us about the feeling that Andre Drummond is for that Detroit Pistons. He is the go-to guy for Detroit, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. They've been playing a lot of team basketball, though. They rely heavily on their starters, but Drummond is certainly, he's leading the NBA in rebounding, and you can tell he's put on a ton of muscle since he's come into the NBA. And he really is the embodiment of what the Pistons are trying to do. They talk about Detroit muscle and Detroit grind and Detroit hustle, and he really embodies what this team is striving for. And he's an electric player. He gets a lot of alley-oop passes. He gets a lot of offensive rebounds and put-back dunks, and he really energizes the fan base.
Now, we're not quite to the halfway point of the NBA season, but being here right at New Year's, it's nice to kind of talk about, we can kind of refer to it as the first half of the season. I mean, each team has played upwards of 30 games so far. And, Aaron, we've looked at the East a little bit, and arguably the East has caught up to the West. I mean, you look at the East and you see all 8 of the playoff teams plus 2 above 500, and if you look at the West, you only got the top 6 above 500. So has the power of the NBA, outside of Golden State and San Antonio, possibly the parity moved to the Eastern Conference this year?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a shift in free agency and in the draft. You've seen a lot of teams or a lot of players shifting over towards the Eastern Conference because it used to be that they were in an easy path to get to the NBA Finals. Of course, you have the powerhouse Cavaliers with LeBron, who you have to get through, but even then, they only have a 2-game lead over the Hawks for the second seed in the East right now. So you see, I think top to bottom, the Eastern Conference is better than the West, but you have 2 elite teams in the Warriors and Spurs in the West. So, it balances itself out, but top to bottom, the East has really played well this year.
Now, outside of injuries, obviously, an injury to Steph Curry or an injury to Kawhi Leonard or, any of the big teams out West, what's it going to take for an Eastern Conference team to to upend the Western Conference team in the finals? I mean, let's take, for example, Golden State gets back. I mean, how's a team like Cleveland or Chicago or Atlanta, how are they going to beat the Western Conference in a 7-game series?
It's really interesting because if Golden State's there and they get that matchup against the Hawks, I would love to see that. I think it would be one of the most enjoyable series for the NBA because the Hawks play so much similar basketball to the Warriors almost, just with how they spread the ball, how they're grounded on defense, despite everyone knows how good the Warriors are offensively, but they're also very good defensively. But what it's going to take is you're going to have to defend for 48-plus minutes every game, every night, and it's going to take everyone being on their best game. And hopefully by the finals, after, an 82-game regular season and at least 4 wins per series, you're going to have your best basketball at the end of the year.
This is the Pick and Pop radio show. I'm Rodney Knuppel along with Aaron Ferguson. Again, our start to the year here brought to you by The Grueling Truth. Make sure you check out The Grueling Truth Facebook page, facebook.com/Grueling Truth. We'll continue talking about the East, and then we're going to kind of shift our attention to the West a little bit. Chicago Bulls, obviously, have been talked about a bunch. I mean, Jimmy Butler came out and blasted Fred Hoiberg. Derrick Rose, is not the same Derrick Rose he was in years past. But if you look at that Bulls roster, they've got a very talented roster. I mean, you got Jimmy Butler, Derrick Rose, Paul Gasol, when Joakim Noah's back, Bobby Portis coming off the bench. Can the Bulls make a run in the East and get to that finals? I mean, we've talked about Cleveland, we've talked about Atlanta. Can the Bulls get to the finals this year?
It's going to be tough. I think what Fred Hoiberg has done is he hasn't so much made it about just Derrick Rose or just Jimmy Butler or just Paul Gasol. It's not a little three-man show like the big three that you're used to seeing. What the East has really done as a whole conference is they're spreading the ball out more. There's more team basketball, and I think that was evident when the Hawks came. And I think the Bulls have done a really good job of that. Hoiberg brings in fresh legs very often. He goes deep into his bench, and I think that'll benefit the Bulls in the long run because they're going to have fresher legs towards the end of the year, whereas a team like the Pistons have their starters playing, upwards of 34, 35, 36 minutes a night, and it's taxing on the NBA season. So I think the Bulls, what they've done with their offense definitely puts them in great position to be competitive come playoff time in the East.
No, I know there's been a lot of discussion about Jimmy Butler, and there was even discussion about, is Jimmy Butler among the NBA's elite? I'm not quite sure I'm ready to put him among the NBA's elite. I mean, if I think elite, I'm thinking Curry, I'm thinking Harden, Durant, Westbrook, LeBron, Anthony Davis probably still fits in that category. So there's 6 guys I'm looking at that I would take above Jimmy Butler. But, Aaron, if you were kind of ranking, groups of 5, do you have Jimmy Butler in your second 5 as far as the kind of the most explosive, most dynamic, dominant players in the NBA this year?
Well, he's shooting close to 45%, 44.7%. But I think the thing that Jimmy really has going for him that you don't see from a James Harden is that he's a two-way player. He's one of the best defensive players in the NBA right now. And so I think that's why he gets so much respect around the NBA. And, of course, he's leading this Bulls team. He's become the team leader both offensively and defensively, leading the team in 21 points per game. And he's playing 38 minutes a night. So I think it's very evident that he's the top player on the Bulls. So you could say he's probably a top 15 player in the NBA for sure. Top 10, probably. Top 5 is debatable. But I think the aspect of him being a two-way player certainly helps his case.
Let's move on to Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. I mean, Paul George obviously coming off that devastating injury. I think if we polled, if we polled 100 NBA fans, I don't even know if half of them could tell you where Paul George went to college, but he is out of Fresno State, and Paul George is putting together a season where he's averaging close to 25 points a game. He's grabbing nearly 8 rebounds a game. I mean, Paul George obviously is another one of those guys. We talked about Jimmy Butler and where he ranks in the NBA. As far as the top guys, where do you put Paul George on that list?
I think he's right up there with Jimmy Butler. I guess what it really boils down to is he's a great scorer and he's the team leader and he has to be on the Pacers. And so just the way he's bounced back this year has just been incredible, coming off such a terrible injury to see when he's over with Team USA. I mean, he's averaging 24.3 points per game on a team that has 6 players averaging 10 points per game or more. And so he's definitely up there as a top player in the NBA.
Now let's do this for fun. I mean, we've only played 30 or so games, but if the postseason started today, we'd have Cleveland against Boston. Now, Brad Stevens' team obviously is putting together. It's Boston or Indiana. They're both tied for the 7th seed, 7-8 seed. I think Indiana's currently got a tiebreaker for what it matters after 32 games. But anyway, so if you had Cleveland against Boston, I mean, I would think that Cleveland would be a little nervous playing against Brad Stevens' team, who you talked about. The whole East is spreading the ball. If you want to look at a team that's spreading the ball, that Boston Celtics team could be scary come postseason. But what would you look at if you saw a Cleveland-Boston first-round matchup?
I think probably the biggest key is how are the Celtics going to – well, they're not going to stop LeBron, but how are they going to contain LeBron? Because LeBron is the best player in the world right now. He's such a great passer, and I think that's where the team comes in because – you can bottle him up as much as you can. You can double team him. You can focus on stopping or containing LeBron, but he's just going to pass out of all those double teams. And so the Celtics, of course, they have a great mind at Brad Stevens. How are they going to contain LeBron and stop him from distributing the ball to other players? And I think what the Warriors did is how other teams are going to have to look at how they stop LeBron.
Yeah, speaking of the Celtics, Isaiah Thomas averaging close to 21 points a game, 7 assists per game. I mean, the NBA All-Star teams have not come out. We're expecting to see Isaiah Thomas in the All-Star game this year, correct?
Yeah, he's been very good for the Celtics.
Yeah, he has been. So let's move on. I wanted to go through all Eastern Conference, kind of the matchups so far. You know, again, we've got 50 games, so we've got a long way to go. But if the playoffs started today, we'd see Atlanta against Indiana. Obviously, quite a matchup there because I think, you know, it's weird because 3 games from now we could see this total matchup flip to the other side and see Indiana hosting Atlanta because they are just 2 games apart. But you saw an Atlanta-Indiana matchup first round. You know, what are we looking at Atlanta and Indiana?
They're 2 very similar teams. I just mentioned the Pacers have 6 players averaging 10 points or more, with Paul George averaging 24.3, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. But I think the Atlanta Hawks, you know, they have a lot of former Spurs personnel in their front office and on their coaching staff, so they know exactly how to win. They know the model for success, and I think what makes the Hawks so successful is, yes, they spread the ball around probably just as good as any team in the NBA, but their defense is what they really pride themselves on. That's where they win their games, win their matchups.
The current 3-6 matchup would be Toronto against Miami, and Miami is one of the best defensive teams in the league. I just wonder how Miami is going to continue to score. I don't see them being a great offensive team. I'm not sure their defense is good enough to hold Toronto down for a 7-game series. What would you see if you found Toronto and Miami matched up first round?
Yeah, that's actually a really great matchup because you have DeMar DeRozan and Dwayne Wade, and then I think probably one of the more underrated matchups if those 2 teams were to play would be Chris Bosh against Luis Scola. Scola's added a 3-point shot this year, which is remarkable for someone as old as he is to add a 3-point shot and be successful with it. And the Raptors have a lot of bigs that they can throw at the Heat, they can throw at Whiteside, they can throw at Bosh. So the Raptors have some pretty good depth. But again, where are the Heat going to score from? You're going to get points from Dwayne Wade, and you're going to get, you know, points from Chris Bosh. But where else are you going to get offense from? You know, so right. I think that's going to be the biggest factor for the Heat. Can they score in the playoffs?
Yeah, you know, if you look at Miami, you know, they're the worst scoring team in the current playoff picture in the East. And in fact, you know, they're one of the worst in all of the Eastern Conference. They're 97 points a game. That's only above Philadelphia and barely below Brooklyn. So yeah, the Heat with some difficulty scoring, and I'm just not sure their defense. Whereas it's ranked as one of the best in the NBA. I'm not sure their defense could pull them through a series, but obviously a long way to go there. And then the final series in the Eastern Conference would put the Bulls against the Magic. Both teams playing right around 600 ball right now. We talked about the Bulls at the beginning of the show here, but Orlando is a team. Orlando's a team that's sneakily fairly having a nice season. Nikolai Vujicic, I can't ever say his name right, but he's scoring 17 points a game. The Magic are again another good defensive team, allowing just over 98 points a game. What are you looking at with a Bulls Magic series?
The Magic are an interesting team right now. And, of course, we're a long way from the playoffs, but they've been relying on Nikola Vucevic to really carry their team over the past couple games. They're on a 2-game winning streak, 7-3 in their last 10 games, and he's really been the factor for them because Victor Oladipo hasn't been scoring, and Tobias Harris has had his good and bad games. So really it would be how would the Magic find ways to keep Vucevic fresh against all of the Bulls' bigs that they can throw at him, and is Victor Oladipo going to rebound and show up? I think the Magic are kind of battling through some of that right now, even though it's still early in the NBA season. So we'll see. We'll see when we get closer to April how all that plays out in Orlando.
Now, it's January 1st, and, we just talked about possible playoff matchups, and obviously we've got a long way to go. But the two-part question for you, Aaron, if you had to pick one team that is not currently in the Eastern Conference playoff picture and one team that is, who would you replace? What team would you have in? What team would you take out, in the next 50 games?
That's a good question. Having covered the Pistons.
Right. Are they a playoff team?
Yeah, I think the Pistons are a playoff team because you look at what they've done without Brandon Jennings. And Jody Meeks, you have to remember, was injured in the second game of the season. And he won't come back until around the All-Star break. So they've really been playing – they've been playing their starters the majority of every game, but they've been playing without a bench, so to speak. They've been playing with the defensive bench, but they are worst offensively. And I think they could overtake a team like the Pacers, who aren't necessarily the best defensive team, and that's where the Pistons thrive, is on defense. Of course, against the Knicks, they struggled. In the first quarter against Minnesota last night, they struggled. But I think the Pistons have all the parts to make the playoffs, and I think that's where Stan Van Gundy is shooting for. I think he wants to, regenerate excitement in the fan base for a team that hasn't been to the playoffs in 7 years, which is hard to think when you think of Detroit Pistons basketball.
Right. So who would you replace right now? One team out of the East you'd have to replace. I'm picking Miami. I'm just not sure their defense will continue to be as good as it's been here in the next 40 to 50 games. And again, we talked about their struggles offensively. They struggle a little bit on the road. I know all teams have struggled on the road outside of Golden State and a couple others. But I'm looking at Miami as one of those teams I don't see continuing their current pace. My second team would be Orlando. I think both teams down there in Florida will be fighting for playoff spots once we get to April. And I look for Indiana and Boston to possibly move up the standings. But I'm taking Detroit as one of those teams I'm filling in as well, and I'm taking the place of Miami and Orlando there.
Yeah, I think the reason why Miami will probably stay in the playoff hunt is because of their defense. We talk so much about defense winning championships, and I think that's why they'll make the playoffs, and that's why I think the Pacers could not make the playoffs. The other thing is the Pistons and the Pacers are in the same division, and they have a matchup later tonight, actually. Or no, excuse me. They play on Saturday night in Indianapolis. So it'll be a big playoff implication matchup, and we'll see what happens.
Let's move our attention to the West. Obviously, a lot of talk on the Golden State Warriors. The San Antonio Spurs team's 28-6. It's so funny because if the Warriors weren't doing what they were doing, all we'd be hearing about is the greatness of Greg Popovich and how the Spurs are in line to win another championship. What's your current take on the 28-6 San Antonio Spurs?
It's interesting because they have Tony Parker, who is getting older. I mean, the Spurs are probably, I don't know the numbers for sure, but I have to imagine they're the oldest team in the NBA. But Tony Parker's only playing 27 minutes a game, and when you think of the Spurs, you think Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan. The tide's shifted. They signed LaMarcus Aldridge on the offseason. Kawhi Leonard's emergence has been huge, and they've really been playing through Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge, who have given the Spurs, a much-needed boost of, I guess, youthfulness and energy. So it takes the pressure off of Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, and they can really thrive late in the game when they need those clutch moments.
For me in the West, I've kind of got them in tiers. I've got like 3 or 4 different tiers that I've kind of placed the West in, and I guess Golden State's in their own tier of their own, obviously at 30-2. But tier 1, I think you've got Golden State, you've got San Antonio, and I'm putting the Thunder and Clippers kind of just below them. I think those 4 teams, all 4, have decent shots at winning the West this year. Obviously, Clippers are going to have to get healthy. I mean, Blake Griffin's going to have to come back and play well. And they've won 5 in a row since his injury. They've won 7 of the last 10. I look at the Clippers as kind of the last chance for the West outside of Golden State, San Antonio, and Oklahoma City. Where are you at with the Clippers?
The Clippers, they have an interesting dynamic right now with Blake Griffin out. With Griffin out, DeAndre Jordan has really stepped up offensively, and Chris Paul has been on fire lately. So, I mean, I'd agree with that assessment. The Clippers have won they're on a 5-game winning streak. They've won on the road. They're 11-7 on the road. They're winning in their division, 4-3 in the division. However, they're 13-10 in the conference. So, I mean, you have a pretty good balance, but you also look at the Mavericks. They're 12-7 against the conference, and right now they're on a 4-game winning streak, and they're 9-8 on the road, 10-5 at home. So I think the Clippers and the Mavericks both would have a good case of overthrowing the Warriors or Spurs, but the way the Warriors and Spurs have played this year, and I guess even last year in the history with the Spurs, it's going to be tough for any team to overthrow them in the West.
Yeah, my next tier kind of starts with Dallas. I've got Dallas, Memphis, and Houston kind of as those are 3 teams I don't see missing the playoffs out of the West this year. They're going to make the playoffs, but I don't think they're going to quite have the splash. Dallas is an interesting case. I know you seem to be a little bit higher on them than I am. I know they've won 4 in a row. I wonder how like Dirk Nowitzki's going to hold up in a playoff series. I wonder what kind of scoring they're going to get outside of him. I know they're scoring over 102 points a game. I mean, they are a team that seems to score. Memphis, on the other hand, I just can't buy into Memphis. A low-scoring team, 96 points a game. They are a team that guards. You talked about defense wins championships. I just don't see it out of Memphis going against, let's say, Oklahoma City or San Antonio. I don't see them withstanding a long run. And then Houston, Houston's a team 16-18, lost 3 in a row. Why are they 16-18 is my question. I know, Kevin McHale was the fallout guy early in the season. I guess that's a good question for you, Aaron. What outside of their defense, is there another good reason the Houston Rockets are below 500?
Well, you look at so many great NBA teams right now, they all have one thing in common, and it's the point guard position. The Rockets haven't had a point guard this year. They've had Ty Lawson, who, I mean, he's struggled. He's had his own problems, with off-the-court stuff. And I think point guard play has been a big factor, and point guard play has been so huge in the Western Conference when you have Damian Lillard, Stephen Curry, Tony Parker, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, and I think that's been a huge downfall for the Rockets.
Yeah, and then kind of my next tier, it's everybody else in the West and then the Lakers. And obviously the Lakers have problems of their own. They're 6-27. You look at, I think that 8th spot in the West is really going to be up for grabs. I mean, right now you got Utah in the lead. I'm not sure Utah can hold that spot. Portland, I'm not sold on them. You got Sacramento. I like Sacramento's talent with Rajon Rondo and DeMarcus Cousins, but you're about a suspension away from losing 5 or 6 games in a row there in Sacramento. I like the young talent of Minnesota, but we saw the other night they're kind of running on gas. low gas here, several games now. Phoenix, too many injuries. They're way below 500. And then, to me, the most disappointing team in all the NBA, especially the West, is New Orleans. Why are the Pelicans 10-22?
That's a good question. I don't think anyone has really an answer as to why the Pelicans have been performing so poorly. There's really no answer. I think Drew Holiday's done a decent job at point guard. Of course, they have Anthony Davis playing well. Ryan Anderson's well talked about. But I think it boils down to defense. I mean, Ryan Anderson's not going to play defense for you. He's not. I mean, that's not why he's there. And so, it's tough to say with the Pelicans. It just isn't working. They made a coaching change prior to the season, and it just hasn't translated into wins for them for whatever reason. They have all the talent in the world to make some noise in the NBA and be a top team. But I guess it's just not working out for them this year.
Yeah, obviously the third worst defensive team in the league, and they're giving up over 106 points a game. Only the Lakers and the Kings have been worse defensively, and that's a problem out of the West, because if you can't guard, teams like Golden State and Oklahoma City are just going to continue to score on you, and we've seen that. Golden State's scoring remarkably 114 points a game. Oklahoma City's just under 109. So for New Orleans, if you can't guard those guys, they're certainly going to exploit you. And then the Los Angeles Lakers at 6-27. It just a train wreck. Only one road win, and tonight, actually they've got 4 road wins. They've just got 1 conference win, which is incredibly bad for the Lakers. I find it interesting. The Lakers have only played 11 home games where they played 22 road games. So a lot of home games coming up for the Lakers. But Aaron, it's not going to matter for the Lakers where they play, is it?
I think it will matter when it comes to gaining experience, because I think going forward, of course, all attention's on Kobe and his, retirement tour this year. But going forward, they have a really interesting setup with D'Angelo Russell, who I think is going to be a very good point guard in the NBA. And they have Julius Randle, who got injured in the first game of the season last year and then hasn't played until this year. So really it's almost as if Randle's learning and having his rookie year this year. So I think they do matter. They have to get experience for their young guys. They have a young team. Jordan Clarkson's a very good scorer. But as far as, where they stand in the NBA, that's not going to matter. But I think they need to really focus on gaining experience for their younger guys.
You're listening to Pick and Pop Radio. Rodney Knuppel of ESPN Peoria and Aaron Ferguson, writer for the Detroit Pistons. I forgot some stuff. Tell us a little bit about what you do for the Pistons. You write at Hoops Habit. Tell us a little bit about what you do. Sell yourself here, Aaron.
Yeah, I cover the Detroit Pistons, and I do daily fantasy sports. I cover DraftKings to provide help, a guide on a almost everyday basis. I do it usually when there's a large slate of games. But I cover the Detroit Pistons, mainly writing analysis pieces on how they've been playing. For example, I just had a piece drop about, their highs and lows of 2015, the calendar year, as we enter 2016. And I took a deep look at what Stan Van Gundy's done to rebuild this team into a team that he's coaching, and a team that I think has the potential to make the playoffs and make some noise in the playoffs. He's done a tremendous job with some of the work he's done, but I'm really doing a lot of analysis on the Pistons. I'll bounce around and do some other cover some other teams, other players, other stories. I've done some Big Ten writing, and really I'm just doing a lot of analysis pieces more than anything.
So let's look ahead at this coming week, obviously here on January 1st, whether you're listening January 1st or you listen anytime this week. There are a full slate of NBA games going on this week. Tonight we've got, I'd say the marquee matchup probably would be Knicks at Bulls. Not a great place New Year's night. Philadelphia, Los Angeles is an interesting one. It's the Lakers' revenge game as Philadelphia picked up their first win earlier in the season at home over the Lakers. So that's kind of the interesting storyline tonight. Let's skip ahead to tomorrow. Aaron, you talked about that Detroit and Indiana game. I think that's a good headline game. Orlando's at Cleveland tomorrow. Houston's at San Antonio. Denver's at Golden State. Philadelphia and the Clippers. As far as Saturday games, outside of the Detroit game, because we know you're going to be covering that Detroit game. What are you most excited about in the NBA for Saturday's slate?
I think there's a lot of fun talent and a lot of good matchups coming up on Saturday. Especially, you have, I think the Bucks Timberwolves is interesting because you have two very young teams. Michael Carter Williams against Ricky Rubio, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, who's having a tremendous rookie year. He just keeps improving. It's crazy. And there's the Thunder and Hornets. I think that'll be an interesting matchup too. You have Kemba Walker against Russell Westbrook. Obviously, Kevin Durant's there. Magic Cavs could be a future, or I guess a sneak peek at a playoff matchup later this year. That'll be fun. It's always fun seeing the Cavs at home with LeBron, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, and there's a lot of good matchups to look forward to on Saturday.
Yeah, then we move to Sunday's action, and I think as the winter, months and towards the spring starts getting here, we see some better Sunday matchups. I find it interesting, another interesting one in the East. Bulls at Toronto on Sunday. It could be, Toronto typically plays a lot better at home. We've seen the Bulls struggle a little bit on the road. Kind of out of the West, we got Portland and Denver, kind of a fringe playoff. Those two teams are going to be trying to fight for that 8th spot because, again, that 8th spot in the West is pretty weak. So I think Portland-Denver is kind of an interesting game on Sunday. Miami-Washington. So not a great slate Sunday, but then we move to Monday's slate, January 4th, first Monday of the new year. And, you kind of look at, you got Sacramento, Oklahoma City. We should see a ton of points out of that. If you're playing DraftKings or, because you cover DraftKings, if you're playing DraftKings, playing FanDuel, what are you looking at as far as Monday's slate? I mean, Sacramento, Oklahoma City's got to put a bunch of points on the board, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. The Kings are so poor defensively. Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant always have a high price tag, but you have to go with one of them just because of the amount of points that are going to be scored. I'd probably go with Russell because he's actually been distributing the ball a lot too, and of course he's a rebounding point guard. He's really good in every facet of the game.
Back Monday night, Charlotte at Golden State. What have you heard of Steph Curry and his status for Monday? Is he looking at trying to come back as they are playing Charlotte? We've heard the narrative of Charlotte, Golden State. I know this game in Golden State, but you've got to think Steph Curry wants to play against Charlotte in this one.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything injury-wise. I imagine we'll know more come Monday, but you have to think he wants to play against his dad's old team, right? Yeah,
you would think so. And then, Golden State's interesting because they got a back-to-back, then they got to go to the Lakers on Tuesday. So I wonder what Curry will do there, what the Warriors are going to do with the back-to-back situation. You've also got Milwaukee at Chicago on Tuesday, Knicks at Hawks, and Kings at Mavericks. And then we're going to look at one more day here, just kind of spread out the week. Wednesday's the big slate in the NBA. You've got, it looks like about a dozen games on Wednesday. The team you covered, Detroit, is at Boston. I think that's got to be an interesting one. We talked about Brad Stevens and his defense and kind of how they're spreading the ball. I think that's got to be a fun one, Detroit-Boston on Tuesday.
Yeah, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope scored 31 points in a win against Boston earlier this year. They've split the season series to date, and I think that should definitely be a game to watch with the race for the last couple seeds of the playoffs. And again, it's early, but this is their third meeting this year, and whoever takes home the season series could find themselves in the playoffs, and the other could find themselves watching the playoffs. That'll be a fun game.
Yeah, out west, you got Utah at San Antonio, Dallas at New Orleans, Memphis at Oklahoma City, Clippers at Portland. So you got a lot of conference games going on here. It should be a fun week for NBA. Real quick, Aaron, we're not going to talk college basketball really at all today. We are going to get to a separate show sometime on college basketball. But Monday, I think we're going to see a really nice college basketball game that Kansas-Oklahoma get together, kind of the Big 12 opener. Probably two of the top teams in the country. I know fans have got to be excited for that one. I know I am. Are you looking forward to seeing Kansas and Oklahoma on Monday night?
Yeah, that'll be fun. It seems Buddy Hield's really elevated his game, carrying Oklahoma. Of course, Kansas, Bill Self is doing, another remarkable coaching job with the great young talent that he has. And they always say the Big 12 is played through Lawrence out of Kansas, so we'll see what Oklahoma can do on the road.
Yep. Well, you're listening to Pick and Pop Radio. We're going to sign off for the day. This has been our first show here. It's January 1st, 2016. We're hoping to bring you a show at least once a week on the NBA, and then we're also going to sprinkle some college basketball in there as well. We'll start nailing down a schedule as we get going on this. We hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Rodney Knuppel. Again, I'm on air for ESPN Peoria out of Illinois, and I'm joined along with my co-host, Aaron Ferguson, writer for HoopsHabit.com, as he covers the Detroit Pistons, and he covers a little DraftKings for the NBA. Aaron, thanks for joining us today. I had a good time on the show today.
Yeah, I did too. Thanks, Rodney. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, and again, you're listening to Pick and Pop Radio. Thanks to The Grueling Truth. Make sure you check out their Facebook page at facebook.com/gruelingtruth. For Aaron Ferguson, I'm Rodney Knuppel. So long.